Whoa, hey there. We hit record and we are back on track. So, yet another episode. Last time around, we talked about stepping away, taking a break. This episode, we are going to talk about something different. Let's see. What are some good things to talk about? Now, in this week, I'm wondering if there's something we should take on because this week we had the CrowdStrike fiasco that like caused all kinds of issues. And this is actually a good one. I think this is something we'll talk about is personal disaster recovery, basically. Because we have had, I've got a few stories in my past of situations where we've been in work environments where we had to make do. And it's like, yeah, you could just say, okay, the world's on fire, so we're just not going to get work done for a while. But sometimes that doesn't help because that means when the world is not on fire anymore, now you got to catch up twice as much. And there's some interesting things that we've done in the past that I've been involved with, just particularly in the last 15, 20 years as technology has advanced and we've gotten beyond the ability, where we weren't like wired in on a network and all these kinds of stuff. And actually, I guess it's gone sort of because it used to be nobody cared if the network went down because there wasn't a network. And then everything was networked and now everything's wireless, but now you still have to, you almost always have to be connected, particularly as a developer. So I think sort of a personal disaster recovery plan, which is also a little bit of a road warrior kinds of things. We've talked about that some, about having a go bag and things like that. But I think we can revisit that with what happens when things go wrong in your normal place of work.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I like that. As you started, I was thinking fighting the environment because I've been doing that a lot lately as the corporation starts to lock us down more and more. Mm-hmm. So like today, I got a critical email. Oh, you need to reboot your machine because we're putting Nannyware on your machine to lock out basically they're controlling everything. Well, then we found out we couldn't hit like Stack Overflow. We couldn't hit Red Hat. And then they immediately had a production issue and they couldn't support it. So yeah, I definitely think good topic.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a white hat, black hat hacker type of thing almost as well. So hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season where we're talking about the developer journey. And today we're going to talk about when the coffee hits the fan, basically, when you're in an environment and it is not a very environment that's conducive to getting work done. Recently, there was a company that we're not going to talk about, but you may have heard about it on the news, depending on how far back this is, that you're, in the future, you're listening to this. They had some issues and it caused a lot of updates to not update properly and a lot of machines and a lot of systems to be unfunctional for a while. I'll even say non-functional because unfunctional is not really a word. Before we get into this one, though, I want to introduce myself. My name is Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders of Developreneur, Building Better Developers, also a founder of RB Consulting, where we tackle technology fatigue and sprawl. And we find ways through simplification, automation, and integration to take your big, nasty, ugly things of technology and streamline them and get it down to something that works well, works solid, and is easy to maintain, upgrade, scale, all that good stuff. Somebody that is pretty much one of a kind, so he's not going to scale very well, and you're not going to get too many upgrades, at least not until they go into the $1 Million Man, all that kind of stuff. Michael, on the other side, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, everyone. My name is Michael Malash. I'm one of the co-founders of Developreneur, and I'm a founder of Envision QA, where we help small and mid-sized companies look at their software stack, see what technologies they have, and help them either integrate better systems or build something that suits more to their needs.
So let's talk about, I think we've talked before about being like a road warrior kind of thing as a developer, and like some of the things where you have, it's useful to have like a lot of different plugs and a lot of different ways to integrate your system to whatever it is you're on, to make sure that your phone can plug in, to make sure that your laptop can plug in. But these days, most people have a laptop. So that allows you to be, you don't have to actually be plugged into power. I mean, you do at some point, but you can go for a while without power. And sometimes you can go without, it's most people need the internet, but the bonus is, and one of the things to prepare yourself, sort of your own little disaster recovery, is have like an external drive where you've got some of your primary source code that you're working on right now, if that's feasible, or make sure that you've brought it local. Even if you're using like GitHub or one of those, or Git or some distributed version control system like that, as long as you've brought stuff local, you can continue to make branches, you can commit, you can do all that stuff, and then eventually you can sync back and get all of that stuff to line back up. So you can fake it. You can also bring, through things we've talked about, like, Docker and Kubernetes and stuff like that. You can have an entire system spun up, virtual servers and all this kind of stuff. And it can take time. It can take an investment to make sure that you have that environment available. But when everything goes wrong, it is useful. I will, before I pass it on to Michael and get your feedback and thoughts, I will share one little story that I have that just sort of like, as we were thinking about and discussing the topic for this is many years ago. It's probably now, shoot, I don't even know. I guess it's probably 15 years ago. It's been a while. Been a day or two, as they would say. And we were working. This was back when everybody basically, nobody worked remote. Everybody worked in an office, and we had a nice big office, and we're in a big office building, and we had deadlines, and we were cranking through stuff. And the power went out. The whole building, power went out. Lost all the internet. Now we had laptops, and they were MacBooks, a little Apple ad. They were basically for you. So they, even then, had serious battery power. So you could code and be a developer for hours on those suckers before they ran out of power. The problem was we had to connect to the internet. This is where it's useful to have a device, usually now it's your phone, that is a hotspot. And we literally are, because our manager was a big iPhone guy. And this is when iPhones had just come out. They'd just gotten to the point where you could actually, I think it was the first version where it was ability to have a hotspot. Your iPhone could be its own hotspot. And he walked out of his office, set his phone on top of a shelf there, and then said, everybody, this is the wireless. Here's the password. And there's like, I don't know, 5, 10 of us that were working on using his phone to connect out to the internet. It was like, 0.0 G or whatever. I don't remember what it was, not 4G or 5G. I can't remember what it was. It was not terribly fast, but it got the job done for as far as like, having to deal with emails and you're not going to download, gigabytes and gigabytes of data, but you probably don't need that. And if you do, you should plan a little bit better so you don't have to in those kinds of situations. Is think through like how self-sufficient is your system if you get in a situation where you really need to get something done, but you don't have your normal work environment. If you're a consultant, if you're a side hustler, this is the kind of thing that can come up fairly often. And it does for me, where you're not anywhere near your office. You're living life, and somebody calls with a critical issue, and you've got to find a way to, to help them out. I mean, you could always drive back home, but it may take 8 hours, and they're maybe down all that time. Particularly, if you're working 24/7 support, things like that. There's all kinds of things that come up. So, look at like your phone. You may be able to do a lot from that these days, because there's, especially if it's a smartphone, you may have a tablet, like an iPad or something like that. You may have like a Chromebook or your regular laptop that you can just, throw in a backpack that you carry with you, which, yes, I'm a geek. I do that way too often. People know me as a guy that's like, I'll sit down at the piano bar and crack out the laptop every so often and be like, all right, I got work to do. Those are some of the things to think about. And it's, as always, you want to think about those before the disaster happens as opposed to when it happens. And on that, no relation to disasters happening, I will pass it over to you and get your thoughts on it, Michael.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so it's funny, your story and how you're talking about the disaster recovery, and especially, we don't want to name names, but the screen of death kind of thing. But as developers, we run into other situations. It's not even just the internet goes down or power goes down. We run into similar issues as to what happened in the news. We could take an update to our IDE. Oops, our IDE is now broken. We could take an update to the operating system. The operating system shot. So building a model or setting up your environment in a way that makes you as basically environment agnostic as possible is key, at least to me. Over the years, and why I say that is over the years, I've gone through different environments, be it Windows, Linux, Unix, Mac, whatever. All of them have the same problems. A system update gets pushed down, things get shot. AS400, a wrong patch gets installed, you're bricked. You now have to restore everything and you're down for hours. As developers, we are susceptible to little things like that. We could go from, say, Java 2 to Java 8, and now the code suddenly doesn't work. We have lots of little things that can break our environment. So we have to be very careful and very mindful of what it is that we do to our machines that could impact our work. And not just the work, but also our customers. Because when we push that software out, we want to make sure that the customer is not impacted by something that we did wrong. So the story I'm going to tell is back at a company we were at, but before you came on, when I first came on board, we had these very ancient archaic machines that barely had 4 gigs of RAM, and we were trying to write code on this. Very minimal system requirements. We kept running out of disk space. So this was before Docker and really before VMs to an extent. VMware had just started out, and our network guy had been using Citrix. So he started spinning up playing around with VM and started spinning up some VM environments. And what I essentially did was I created a base environment image, and that was the only image that was allowed to go out to any of the developers. So all we had to do was we basically just dropped our image, reload the image, and it pointed to a virtual drive that had all their files in a separate location. So they never lost their files. We would always, once a quarter, review any system updates, security patches, whatever. We did it in one silo, made sure it worked, and then we pushed it out to everyone. We never went down. Prior to that, we had hard drives going out. We had monitors going out. We had more hardware issues than you could throw a skunk at. It was crazy. Now, in today's world, we have Docker, we have containers, we have things that we can set up, and now all you need is a virtual disk space or a virtual environment. You can do it online, you could do it on your computers, you can essentially do it anywhere. And then you essentially, again, treat your environment as a silo, and if you need to change something, test it there. If you break it there, you're not impacting your development. So that's just one approach I would take to saving yourself the headaches of potential disaster from updates.
First off, I have to start with the visual image of throwing a skunk at your problems. I was just like, got to watch out. Pepe Le Pew may get a little bad when you do that. That is actually a perfect example of the kind of disaster recovery environments that we would love to have. This is something that now it's much more feasible to do in the world of cloud development, all that kind of stuff. It is very easy to set up, and I have done this. I actually did this for one of the seasons. I can't remember how far back we did, where I went through the entire thing. I did an entire project, and I used Amazon's Cloud9. I think it may have been before Amazon bought Cloud9, but it was basically working on a completely virtual IDE. So I just logged in. It didn't matter where I was, what machine I was on. I logged in. It logged me into my machine that was out there. Yes, I needed to have internet connectivity, but other than that, all my code was there. Everything I'd done, it was everything I needed. My entire environment was there. And it was very similar to what Michael just described. Although the one he described was a bit more powerful because of, it's Citrix and it was closer and some things like that. But the nice thing about that is like when I came in, I used that environment all the time. and I almost never had to touch my actual laptop. Didn't care what was on it, didn't care anything about it. As long as I could get to the browser for that, the Citrix window, I could go open up the session. And yes, we did have problems as we grew a little bit because people would step on each other's sessions. We had to have the right sync. You had about 6 or 7, development environments we had set up. But then you knew where to go. If I'm focused on this, I'm going to go to this machine. If I'm focused on that, I'm going to go to that machine. If I need to go fix the database, I got to go to this one. It's those kinds of things allow you to be completely free. Now you don't have to worry about, oh crap, I left that on my machine. So utilize the cloud for that kind of stuff. Don't be afraid to use things like definitely GitHub and places like that for your version control so you can access your source code from anywhere. Also, I make heavy use of Dropbox and have for a long time, and there are other tools like that that are commercially available. If you want to do your own personal cloud, there are plenty of options for that where you basically go get a multi-terabyte drive and then you can access it from anywhere as long as you want to take care of this, security and things like that. These things they are more than worth their weight in gold when you need them. And if you get yourself using them all the time, you will find more and more, for example, that you don't need a high-end laptop when you go upgrade your development laptop or your development machine. You just need a way to get to that environment. Maybe you just need a browser. So now suddenly, maybe it is like a little Chromebook works fine for you because you really that thing doesn't matter. All that matters is you have a decent display, a decent keyboard, and you can browse to wherever your cloud environment is. And this is becoming more and more common, particularly if you're in the world of like Salesforce and NetSuite and HubSpot and all these things that are you can live your professional life on this site or in this software as a service solution, and you don't have to worry about it being on your machine and sharing stuff out and all the things that can be involved in that. Closing thoughts?
Yeah, in addition to what we've talked about up to this point, the other thing that this type of approach is good for is if you are looking at taking on new customers, or you have a customer that needs some software written and you're not sure if either your software is going to work with theirs. This is where you can build those virtual environments locally, test them, and make sure they work before you actually impact the production environment. If you need more RAM, ahead of time, go buy the RAM, put it in the cost. Don't just push your software out and then have 1,000 users turn around and say, hey, only 10 people can get in because we don't have enough switches. These are things that you can test, you should be testing. And the beauty of it is not that expensive to build your own virtualization environment at home or on the web.
It is also not that expensive to give us some feedback, to get something in there, throw some comments out there, give us a little love, a little like, hey, we're spending some time here. We're coming into I know it is a little bit intrusive coming into your ear holes as we are, whether you're audio or your eye holes if you're watching through YouTube. But we love that feedback. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear where would you like us to go next as we're talking through our developer journey. And yes, we are not done. We are only about roughly halfway maybe through the season, and we've got plenty of topics ahead. Even we don't know what those topics are yet, though, because we're sort of like we're journeying as we go through some of these things. And that's worked out pretty good, we think, so far. Hopefully you agree, but obviously your feedback will help. And we can either use your name or we can keep you anonymous if you want to, if you don't want to have anything to do with us. We get that. However, come on back, hang out with us for a little bit and see where we go with this. Feedback is always welcome. And as always, go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus material. I will say particularly, I have lost days in the past, particularly with React development, Node development, Python and Java, particularly like Maven environments and stuff where you've got a lot of libraries. I think I haven't run into it as much in the .NET world, but I haven't done as much in recent years when they've gotten into their whole, nuggets and all that. I forget what they call them, but if you're in that kind of an environment, one, turn off automatic updates. Like, save yourself the headache, because it's amazing how often, as Michael alluded to, an automatic update blows your whole world up and you can lose days. The other thing is if you can get yourself comfortable on a regular basis working in a virtual environment, then it will help you immensely when those things happen, because you're always in that environment. You're used to it. And so if something happens and you accidentally take an update or whatever, you just say, okay, I'm going to go back to my last backup, things like that. And particularly that's the other thing, back up regularly, make sure that at the end of the day, that you've not just moved your problems into a virtual environment, but that also you are doing backups and things like that. Depending on how you've got stuff set up, there are a lot of tools out there. You can use like Apple's Time Machine, and then there's all those things out there where you can find a lot of ways to back up even huge amounts of data. Like if you've got a 50 gig, 100 gig, 200 gig virtual environment, you can have that thing just sync somewhere and just update every night while you go to sleep or something like that. There are a lot of ways to do it. Just make sure that when you do it, that you keep that environment pristine. And as Michael said, is like, don't be afraid to like back it up. If you've got to do updates or you've got to do an upgrade or something like that, back up the one and then come back, and then you can go ahead and pull all that stuff down, verify it, and then you can say, okay, I can stamp this as good and move forward.
Okay, I remembered.
Okay.
All right. So we've talked about the virtualization, we've talked about the environments and everything. Something that hit me today is power. So yes, our laptops have, pretty decent battery power. Our phones have pretty decent battery power. But you sometimes run into situations where you did not bring the right cable, or you did not plan ahead with, charging before you went on that road trip, or you lost power in the middle of, what you're trying to get out for production. Having battery backups, having UBS backups, generators, things of that nature, in this day and age, it is also prudent to think about some other type of power backups to just ensure that you are still working, be it solar or whatever, just to make sure that you do have that extra redundancy, because you never know. We get storms out here from time to time. A tree may take out a power line, might not. You never know. So just kind of a side thought on that. Think about what you have for your existing environment outside of your typical utilities. What can you do to keep the power on so you can keep working?
That makes sense. And that is something that I guess I hadn't really thought about, but I have at times, the idea of having like either little, and they are incredibly like decently priced if you want to have there are solar generators and ways to capture energy and stuff like that. Particularly if you go look in the camping world and things like that, there are a lot of ways to get that extra power. We worked with a developer years ago that was at a place where they were on basically at midnight everything shut down, all electricity, everything went dark at midnight. And so when that hit, he would go out in the back and he had like 2 hours worth of power, because he'd go crank up a gas powered generator and he'd be able to use that for a while. I mean, there's things like that you can do. So power is pretty pretty important to get through. That being said, I think that's good enough for now. We got to wrap it up. We got to get going and get back to our work and all of our stuff. So continue, as always, give us feedback, info@developreneur.com. Leave us comments, however, smoke signals, whatever it is, Facebook, X, developreneur.com on the forums. You can submit stuff. We're happy to hear from you, and look for new suggestions and things like that from you guys. That being said, go out there and have yourselves a good one, and we will be back next time around, bushy-eyed and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as always, and we won't throw skunks at you. Have a good one.